In today's video, we'll examine 5 families who were eaten alive by deadly animals, from a bear's rampage in Alaska to a shark's feeding frenzy off Reunion Island. But first, we begin in Washington, where a family's camping trip would end in horror when a cougar decided that 4 victims were better than 1. It was August 19, 2015 in Okanogan National Forest, Washington. Late summer had brought a stretch of dry, hot days that left the underbrush brittle and the streams low. To most visitors, it seemed like an ideal time for camping. But the emptiness also meant that predators moved with little disturbance. Eli Mitchell, 38, was a Spokane resident who worked as a mechanic in a family-owned garage. He had grown up fishing with his father, and he had taken a liking to simple camping trips in the Cascades as an adult. He was quiet, dependable, and well-regarded among co-workers for his steady hands with engines. His wife Dana, 35, worked part-time at a local pharmacy and was known in their neighborhood as someone who organized potlucks and encouraged outdoor activities for the kids. Together, they raised 2 children, Matthew, age 9, and Claire, age 6. The family had planned this trip for weeks. Eli had recently purchased a larger tent, excited to try backcountry camping instead of the more crowded campgrounds they were used to. His goal was to give his children an authentic wilderness experience before school resumed in September. For the Mitchells, the outing was meant to be a small adventure, a test of whether their kids could handle a more rugged environment. Although not reckless, Eli sometimes underestimated risks, convinced that his own caution and resourcefulness would be enough to keep his family safe. The Okanogan landscape was expansive and deceptively quiet, with tall firs casting long shadows across dry meadows and ridges of granite cutting into the horizon. Near Salmon Meadows, where the Mitchells stopped for lunch, a thin dirt trail wound between thickets of alder and grass. The Mitchells had noticed a ranger station posting a week-old advisory mentioning a cougar sighting near Salmon Meadows. Eli brushed it off as unlikely, reasoning that predators avoided human activity. When another hiker they passed on the trail casually mentioned hearing of the same report, Dana expressed unease, but Eli reassured her. Later, when they stopped at a clearing around 4 p.m. to eat sandwiches, he set his backpack against a log and encouraged the children to look for birds with binoculars. The quiet of the clearing, interrupted only by their voices, gave no sign of danger. Cougars, or mountain lions, are apex predators in this region, solitary and primarily nocturnal. Adults typically weigh between 90 and 150 pounds. Capable of leaping more than 20 feet in a single bound. They prefer ambush, attacking from cover and targeting the head, neck, or spine of prey. Attacks on humans are rare, but usually occur when the animal has been stressed, is hungry, or perceives opportunity. A common behavior after a kill is caching, dragging remains into cover and burying them under leaves or debris to return later. From a nearby ridge, a hiker scanning the valley through binoculars later recalled noticing the family just before the incident. He saw Eli standing to stretch while the children ate, Dana nearby. The brush behind them seemed still, yet in seconds, the scene erupted. A cougar sprang from cover, landing directly on Eli's back. The force drove him forward onto his knees, then flat to the ground as the predator clamped its jaws into his neck and shoulder. Dana screamed and struck the animal with a stick, while Matthew hurled the rock that bounced off the cat's flank. For a moment, the cougar released Eli, who struggled to rise with blood running down his shirt, but the animal pivoted, swiping a claw across Dana's arm and chest, knocking her sideways. The children cried out, Matthew clutching Claire as the cat lunged again, this time sinking teeth into Eli's throat. The witness described seeing Eli's body jerk violently, his legs kicking against the dirt before going slack. The predator then turned toward the children. Dana pushed herself upright, stumbling forward to shield them. The cougar raked its claws across her back, leaving deep wounds but not killing her outright. She collapsed beside Matthew and Claire, bleeding heavily, still trying to reach them. Matthew attempted to run, dragging his sister, but the animal seized Claire by the midsection, lifting her with terrifying ease. The hiker reported hearing Dana's final screams as the cougar carried the girl into cover. The witness on the ridge later admitted he hesitated, frozen by the distance and the speed of what he saw. With no cell signal, he finally ran for help, reaching a ranger station nearly an hour later. By then, the clearing had gone silent. Search teams arrived that evening, combing the area. Eli's remains were discovered partially buried under leaves and branches, consistent with caching behavior. Claire's body was found nearby, while Dana was pulled out alive but in critical condition, flown by helicopter to Spokane, where she survived after multiple surgeries. Matthew was located uninjured but in shock, having hidden in a brush until rescuers found him. The cougar responsible was identified through DNA samples and later tracked and euthanized. Instead of a formal statement, the authorities held a public Q&A session where rangers explained cougar behavior and urged residents not to dismiss posted advisories. For Matthew, counseling was arranged through his school, and neighbors organized regular outings to keep him engaged. Yet, even as the Mitchell family's weekend ended in the fury of a mountain predator, in Alaska, a family would step away for the perfect photograph, unaware that a massive bear was already watching them. It was July 15, 2017, in Katmai National Park, Alaska. Tourists had come for the spectacle of bear fishing at Brooks Camp, hoping for safe but close encounters. The setting seemed controlled, even routine, but beneath the calm, the risk was always present. That night, one family's decision to drift from safety ended in disaster. Greg Anders, 42, lived in Anchorage with his wife Melissa, 40, and their two teenage sons, Ethan, 15, and Ryan, 13. Greg worked as a logistics manager for an air cargo company, a job that kept him grounded in planning and order. He prided himself on being the kind of father who encouraged exploration, someone who believed nature was best appreciated up close. Melissa, who worked part-time as a school aide, was cautious but trusted her husband's judgment. Their sons, restless and curious, had grown up camping and fishing, though always under structured conditions. The Katmai trip was meant to be more than a vacation. For Greg, it was a chance to show his boys Alaska's wilderness at its rawest. They had chosen a guided bear viewing tour to balance safety with proximity. Greg carried a new camera with a long lens, eager for the kind of photographs he could frame at home. Though the guide emphasized group discipline, Greg's confidence in his own awareness, built from years of outdoor recreation, made him less worried than others about the risks of straying a little closer. Brown bears in Katmai are among the largest in the world, with some males exceeding 1,200 pounds. They rely heavily on the salmon run for sustenance, competing fiercely for fishing spots. Though generally tolerant of human presence when people remain in groups and act predictably, they are quick to react to sudden movements or perceived threats. Defensive attacks occur when bears feel cornered or surprised, and once provoked, their strength and speed leave little chance for escape. The tour guide had repeated warnings throughout the day. Stay together, keep voices low, never move toward a bear, and always carry spray. When the Anders family edged away from the group, cameras in hand, the guide called out for them to return. Greg waved him off, motioning that they were only going a little closer. Melissa hesitated, urging the boys to stay near, but followed Greg as he moved down a short slope toward the riverbank. They stopped roughly 30 yards ahead of the others, placing them within about 40 feet of the alders lining the water, well inside the safety margin the guide had stressed. What happened next unfolded quickly, but with an inevitability the rest of the group could see coming. From the thickets near the river, a large coastal brown bear emerged. At first, it seemed unaware of the family, focused on the salmon-rich water. But when Melissa let out a startled cry, the bear swung its head and fixed on them. The guide shouted for the family to regroup immediately, but in that moment the bear lowered its head and charged. Witnesses said the sound of the charge was unmistakable. Brush snapping, heavy paws pounding against the ground, and a guttural huffing roar. Greg raised his arms, fumbling with the bear spray on his hip but unable to bring it up in time, as the animal closed the distance in seconds. It struck him squarely, the impact knocking him to the ground. The bear's jaws clamped down on his shoulder and neck, shaking violently. Melissa rushed forward, grabbing a stick, striking futilely at the bear's flank. The animal released Greg only to swat her aside, claws tearing into her torso and sending her collapsing near the boys. Ethan tried to pull her back while Ryan screamed, frozen in place. The bear lunged again, biting deep into Melissa's abdomen. She gasped and fell limp as the boys shrieked. The predator turned next to the teenagers, who clung together paralyzed. Ethan pushed Ryan behind him, but the bear's paw swept across his face and chest, opening deep gashes. Instead of moving methodically from one victim to another, the bear reacted chaotically, striking at whoever moved or cried out. Its weight crushed Ethan as it pinned him to the dirt. Ryan tried to crawl away, but the bear caught him by the leg, dragging him back with terrifying ease. Witnesses from about 50 yards away said the boys' cries carried across the clearing as the animal mauled them in bursts, the struggle lasting less than 2 minutes, though it felt far longer to onlookers. When the bear finally turned away, Ryan was still alive, bloodied but conscious, his leg mangled. Ethan lay motionless beside him. Melissa and Greg were already beyond help. The animal disappeared into the brush as quickly as it had come. Rangers reached the site later that evening after a frantic call from the guide. Clothing and remains were scattered in a wide circle around the riverbank, consistent with a defensive mauling. Ryan was evacuated by helicopter and underwent multiple surgeries in Anchorage. He would survive, but face permanent damage to his leg. Ethan's body was recovered, while Greg and Melissa had to be left in the field until conditions allowed retrieval. The funeral aftermath in Anchorage drew wide attention. Ryan's survival turned the story into a point of debate about whether close-contact bear tourism was worth the risk. Katmai officials responded by tightening their safety briefings and instituting stricter enforcement of group cohesion during tours. But they stopped short of restricting bear viewing altogether, citing its importance to tourism and education. The Anders family's dream vacation in Alaska ended in the charge of a brown bear. And in Tanzania, a family would ignore their guide's warnings about displaying food near a chimpanzee, unaware that the primates watching them possessed a capacity for violence. It was August 4th, 2013, in Gombe Stream National Park, Tanzania. Tourists moved in small groups on designated trails, guided by rangers who knew the forest rhythms. For the Sabuga family, the day began with calm anticipation, but the forest danger would soon reveal itself with startling violence. John Sabuga was 45 years old, a secondary school math teacher from Uganda. He was regarded by colleagues as disciplined and thoughtful, a man who avoided risk but valued opportunities for his family to experience the world beyond their home. His wife Margaret, 43, worked as a midwife in a rural clinic. The couple had decided to take their 12-year-old niece, Aisha, on a short trip during school holidays, hoping to show her the primates that had made Gombe famous through Jane Goodall's long studies. For them, it was a cultural and educational experience, not an adventure trip. Their decision to stop in Gombe was practical. They were already visiting relatives in northwestern Tanzania, and the park was a day's travel away. John had read brochures that described chimpanzees as sharing over 98% of human DNA, intelligent but unpredictable. The Sabugas booked a guided walk to stay safe, believing that with a ranger present, there was little risk. Margaret, however, had a habit of keeping small bags of food for convenience. She tucked a few bananas into her day pack before leaving, unnoticed during the ranger's quick bag check. What she meant as a harmless snack would prove catastrophic. As they reached a clearing near a known feeding site, the guide pointed out distant rustling, evidence of a nearby troop. Chimpanzees are powerful primates, averaging 100 pounds but capable of sudden explosive strength far beyond their size. Males can reach 5 feet standing upright and possess jaws with a bite force comparable to that of large dogs. They're social hunters, known to patrol and defend territories with violent precision. In Gombe, feeding sites are points of high tension, as competition among chimpanzees is fierce. Tourists are warned never to display food, since the troop will interpret it as contested resources. The guide noticed Margaret's bag and cautioned her not to open it. She assured him it was secure, yet the faint scent of bananas carried through the clearing. The first signs appeared as distant shrieks and branch shaking. Roughly 6 to 8 chimpanzees closed in quickly, moving with speed that caught the family off guard. The guide later described the shift as immediate, from observation to aggression. The small group of chimps began to circle the family, blocking their retreat. John positioned himself between the chimps and the women, but the animal's attention focused sharply on Margaret. When one male lunged, she instinctively pulled the bag closer to her, a movement that ignited the frenzy. The chimp sank its teeth into her forearm, and others followed, pulling her down as she struggled. Their screams pierced the air, echoing through the clearing. Witnesses said Margaret was dragged to the ground in seconds, her arms and face torn by repeated bites. Blood covered her quickly, bright against the forest floor. John rushed forward to pull her free, but was intercepted. 2 males clamped onto his hands, biting off fingers and raking their teeth across his chest. He tried to push them back, but was overwhelmed, his strength no match for the coordinated attack. His cries grew hoarse as more chimps joined, each tearing at exposed flesh. The guide attempted to scare them off, striking the ground with a stick, but the troop only grew louder, shrieking as they continued their assault. Margaret lay motionless, her body mutilated, while John writhed under relentless bites. Aisha was dragged several yards away, slapped across the face, and left crouched and trembling. Unlike her aunt and uncle, she was not fatally attacked. Her small size and lack of food seemed to make the chimps lose interest once she stopped moving. The attack lasted less than 5 minutes, but it unfolded with devastating clarity. The guide's radio call brought rangers rushing to the site, carrying firecrackers and metal sheets to create noise. The chimps retreated reluctantly, some still baring their teeth as they slipped back into the trees. The aftermath was grim. Rangers found Margaret's arm shredded and her face unrecognizable from trauma. John's chest bore deep gashes, his hands reduced to torn bone and tissue. Their clothing was ripped apart, blood soaking through fabric. Aisha was found sitting in shock beside the Ranger, bruised and dazed, but alive. She was evacuated to a local clinic for treatment and later reunited with relatives in Uganda. News of the attack spread quickly through Kigoma, the small lakeside town that serves as the park's gateway. Guides and rangers gathered the next morning for a closed meeting, shaken by what had happened on a route they had walked countless times. Several tourists already in the park chose to cancel their treks and leave early, unsettled by the thought of violence in a place usually associated with scientific discovery and primate research. Aisha remained under observation for days, her presence a reminder that survival in the forest often came down to chance. However, even as the Sabuga's adventure ended in the chaos of a chimpanzee troop, back in India, a shopkeeper would lean too far, unaware that a tiger watching from the shadows had a fierce maternal instinct that would soon result in tragedy. It was May 12, 2016, in Banvagar National Park, Madhya Pradesh, India. The early morning sun filtered through the sal trees, casting long shadows across the dirt tracks that wound through the reserve. For the visitors riding in open jeeps, the calm was part of the appeal, though it was the kind of calm that could dissolve instantly. Rajesh Sharma was 41, a shopkeeper from Jabalpur who had built the reputation for being diligent and dependable. His small corner store provided groceries and supplies for neighbors, and though modest, it allowed his family stability. Rajesh rarely took vacations, but his son, recently 15, had finished exams with top marks. To mark the achievement, Rajesh decided on a safari to Bandhavgarh, a trip that combined education with celebration. He wanted his son to see India's wildlife firsthand, believing it would be a reward worth remembering. His wife Kavya, 38, encouraged the trip. She was practical, known in their community for balancing the family's finances carefully, but she agreed that this was a chance to step away from routine. They booked a guided safari, joining other tourists in the early drive. Rajesh had recently purchased a new camera on installment, eager to photograph the landscapes and animals. Though inexperienced with wildlife, he was fascinated by the chance to capture a tiger, the park's most famous predator. His intentions were not reckless, but his eagerness and lack of field awareness would set the stage for what followed. The safari began along dirt paths lined with thick grasses taller than the jeeps. The forest smelled of damp earth and sun-warmed vegetation. The deeper the jeeps went, the quieter it grew, and the passengers' voices lowered with it. Bandhavgarh is known for its high tiger density, with resident Bengal tigresses defending territories for their cubs. The drivers knew that silence and patience often revealed what tourists most hoped to see. Bengal tigers are solitary hunters, weighing between 300 and 500 pounds. They can cover short distances at speeds of 40 miles per hour and strike with jaws that exert a bite force of over 1,000 pounds per square inch. Mothers with cubs are notoriously aggressive, attacking not out of hunger, but protection. In Bandhavgarh, most tiger encounters end with the animal retreating if unprovoked. But close proximity, especially if tourists leave vehicles, can trigger fatal responses within seconds. That morning, fresh pug marks appeared in the dirt, and soon a tigress with 2 cubs was sighted near tall grass. The guide instructed the passengers to stay seated inside the jeep. reminding them that leaning out or standing could provoke a charge. The cubs were visible, playing near their mother, and excitement swept through the group. Rajesh raised his camera, leaning forward as he tried to frame the animals. The guide reminded him to stay back, but Rajesh shifted further over the side, the camera strap dangling. From a distance, tourists in another jeep noticed the tigress stiffen, her ears flattening, her tail lashing once as a low growl escaped her throat. Her eyes locked on the movement. The driver whispered a warning, but Rajesh, intent on his picture, ignored the tension. He leaned farther still, upper body extended, until he lost the protection of the jeep's frame. In that instant, the tigress lunged from the grass. Witnesses later described the movement as instantaneous. One moment, stillness, the next a blur of orange and black crashing into the vehicle's side. Her jaws clamped onto Rajesh's torso, teeth sinking deep into his side. The force pulled him down before anyone could react. His camera fell, shattering on the track as he was dragged from the jeep. He screamed briefly, arms flailing, but the tigress's weight pinned him. Kavya, in reflex, grabbed his arm and pulled, her face contorted with shock as she tried to hold him against the jeep's edge. The tiger swiped with a forepaw, claws tearing into her shoulder and chest, sending her sprawling partly out of the vehicle. Once Rajesh was pulled clear, the tigress turned on Kavya, seizing her and dragging her into the cover of grass. The son cried out, his voice breaking, while the driver slammed the side of the jeep and shouted. Other jeeps in the area stopped, their passengers frozen as the scene unfolded. No one could approach. The tigress had both adults, her cubs shrieking nearby as if spurred by the violence. From the grass came sounds of struggle, branches breaking, muffled cries, and the guttural snarls of the predator. The noise lasted less than a minute before silence returned, heavy and complete. The witnesses described feeling paralyzed, the attack too fast to prevent. Rangers were called, immediately arriving with vehicles and firecrackers to push the tigress deeper into the forest. When they searched the grass, they found only scattered remains. Rajesh's clothing was shredded, soaked with blood, his body partially consumed at the abdomen and upper thighs. Kavya's form lay nearby, torn and mutilated, her face barely recognizable. The tigress had fed, leaving the bodies covered in disturbed earth and vegetation. Rangers noted claw marks on the jeep's side and blood streaked across its metal step, evidence of how close the attack had been. In the days that followed, the focus didn't fall on ceremonies, but on those who had seen it unfold. 2 foreign visitors filed written accounts with park officials, their words describing not only the violence but their own inability to intervene. The tigress was not hunted or relocated. Conservation authorities ruled the attack a defensive response, leaving her and her cubs within the territory. The Sharma family's celebration in India's tiger country ended in the lightning strike of a protective mother's fury. But thousands of miles away on the tropical shores of Reunion Island, a family from St. Denis would ignore the red flags fluttering in the ocean breeze where bull sharks patrolled. It was October 14, 2018, on the western shores of Reunion Island. The day was clear, the sea calm and blue under the mid-morning sun. Families dotted the sand, and though red flags snapped in the breeze signaling danger, some visitors ignored them. The water's surface gave no sign of what circled beneath, yet it was there, hidden and waiting. The calm setting masked the violent minutes to come. Pierre Laurent was 39, a lifelong resident of St. Denis. He worked as a civil engineer, known among colleagues for being precise and hard-working. He had grown up swimming off the island's beaches and often spoke of his frustration at the restrictions imposed after recent shark attacks. Though he acknowledged the danger, he believed that the risks were overstated. That familiarity with the ocean gave him a measure of safety. His wife Isabella, 37, shared his affection for the sea. She taught at a local elementary school and spent her weekends outdoors. Their son Matthew, 12, had inherited that same enthusiasm. The family had discussed the warnings, but decided together that swimming close to shore would be harmless, especially on a bright morning with other people nearby. It was meant to be a short, enjoyable break from daily life. Their decision was not reckless in intent, but grounded in misplaced confidence. A belief that danger could be managed through caution. The sand was warm, the air filled with the smell of salt and sunscreen, while waves rolled in with steady rhythm. Offshore, reefs broke the surf into manageable swells. To many, it seemed like an ordinary beach morning, but the presence of red flags and posted warnings about recent shark sightings lingered in the background. Bull sharks inhabit tropical and subtropical waters, and Reunion is notorious for encounters. They can reach lengths of 10 feet and weights over 500 pounds. Adapted to both salt and fresh water, they're aggressive and territorial, especially in nearshore environments where swimmers and surfers often enter. Their jaws exert more than 1,300 pounds of bite force, capable of crushing bone. Most incidents occur without provocation, the shark mistaking people for prey or intruders. Several locals on the beach noted the flags and spoke quietly about them. The Laurents, however, had seen others waiting near the shallows. They reasoned that if the water appeared calm and others entered, the risk was manageable. The family walked past the warning signs, stepping into the surf. Matthew entered first, splashing playfully, with Pierre and Isabel a short distance behind. A coastal official with a megaphone raised the warning call from the beach, but wind and waves muffled his voice. At about 20 to 30 yards offshore, Matthew floated briefly on his back. Without warning, the water erupted. Witnesses later described a violent surge of spray and thrashing as the bull shark struck from below, seizing the boy. Screams carried across the beach as Matthew was pulled under, his arms flailing once before disappearing in a froth of red. Pierre lunged forward, grabbing at the water where his son vanished. The shark resurfaced with another surge, clamping onto Pierre's leg. Its jaws closed around his thigh with bone-snapping force, and he cried out as blood spurted in the surf. He was yanked sideways, dragged several feet before the shark released him briefly, only to circle back. Isabel, still near the shallows, rushed farther in, reaching for Pierre's arm. Before she could pull him, the shark struck again. It twisted its body and bit across her torso, tearing through skin and muscle. Witnesses described her scream cutting off suddenly as the animal thrashed, lifting her partly out of the water before releasing her limp body. Pierre, though grievously wounded, managed to cling to the side of the rescue float thrown from the beach. Two men waded out waist deep and dragged him toward shore, while the shark veered away. He lost consciousness almost immediately, blood trailing in sheets, but he was not dead. The scene devolved into chaos. Beachgoers shouted and threw flotation devices, but the shark returned repeatedly, striking in short bursts. Blood spread quickly, turning the surf crimson. Isabel's body was pulled under, while Matthew did not resurface. Within minutes, the shark circled once before vanishing into deeper water. Rescue boats were dispatched from the nearby station. By the time they arrived, the slick of blood had spread wide across the surface. They recovered Isabel's body and portions of Matthew's remains, but Pierre was transported alive, his legs shredded, to a hospital in Saint Denis. Surgeons later amputated above the knee to save him. In the weeks that followed, local papers tracked Pierre's recovery, showing him in rehabilitation with crutches and bandaged stumps where his leg had been. Fishermen debated openly whether sharks should be culled or protected, their arguments spilling into community meetings. On the shoreline, makeshift memorials of flowers and toys accumulated. Not organized events, but quiet gestures from strangers who had read about the family. Thanks for watching. If these stories of peace and quiet turning violent and deadly entertained you, click here for more.